So, yesterday, I didn't get a chance to do this because, of course, it's spring break and my mom is off this week, so gotta work with what you have. But yesterday, CM Punk appeared on the MMA Hour with Ariel Hawani, and Ariel basically said nothing was going to be off limits. Now, of course, Punk couldn't talk about certain things, because of NDAs and all that. But what he said, I thought was, pretty. I would say if you were to choose who you're gonna believe more over from one side to over one side over the other, there's no doubt people will believe CM Punk here. There's definitely no doubt. I mean, you do it percentage wise, it's gonna be, basically 85-15, if you will. And like I said, Punk, talked about a lot of things. Gave his personal feelings and stuff. Like for example, when he was asked about, the triceps tear, the update, and how, he kind of used it to compare, things between WWE and AEW. Um, he basically said that because he has certain kind of mindsets, if you will, that the hockey player mindset in his head tells him tape it up and still do WrestleMania. But then he mentions, and this is WWE that he's talking about, that they are protecting him against himself, and that because he likes to push protocols, and he's not one to listen to doctors and people telling him to pump the brakes. He says it's the same kind of tear that he got, at All Out 2022 in AEW, but it's just the pain difference that was noticeable. He said the latest injury, hurts worse, but later, in the chat, but later in the interview, I should say, it became a metaphor to expand on Punk's feelings between the differences between both companies, that being AEW and WWE. He mentions that post Brawl Out, 2022, he said there was no communication for him from AEW for 6 months. When the left one was injured in AEW, he mentioned having his left arm, Punk had to pay for surgery, find rehabilitation, and do things for himself. But WWE, however, covered everything. The difference for Punk is between the difference for Punk is between the two companies in structure, protocols, and professionalism, and we've noticed that. We've noticed that WWE, under the new regime, has taken more precautions. Like if they have to stop a match, midway through because of a potential concussion, they're gonna do it. No questions asked. He did mention that, he in the Royal Rumble when he appeared there, he said he did mention in history of repeating itself, acknowledging that his last Royal Rumble match, he also suffered a concussion and probably should have been taken out. That being the 2014 one, which was Punk's last match. They said that Glenn Jacobs, had to return and remove Punk before chokeslamming Punk through the announce table. Punk previously stated at the time when he told the doctor, they asked Punk, "What do you want me to do?" So, yeah. Punk does say, as far as the injury now here in 2024, he thought it was acceptable for him to make the call to continue. Basically, continue on doing what he can, if you will. Now, here's what gets interesting. He talks about his return to WWE at Survivor Series last November, and he basically says that he received a call from Nick Khan on the week of Thanksgiving, which was 5 days before, 5 days before Survivor Series in his hometown of Chicago. He says the initial call was for the Royal Rumble, and Punk basically stated that Nick Khan assumed Punk had a no compete clause with AEW, but he did not. Punk goes on to say that he told Khan that that's not the case. I'm free, I can do whatever I want. And Nick Khan's response was, "Oh, I really wish I knew that." you know, because apparently somebody didn't communicate with him, like, oh, by the way, he doesn't, there's no compete clause as far as we know in contracts with AEW. I guess that goes for everybody. May not anymore, but we'll see. Um, Later in the interview, CM Punk described how Nick Khan, before joining WWE, tried to get Punk to return to the company in 2020. And when asked about this, CM Punk stated, if not for Nick Khan, he doubts he would have returned to WWE. So he credits Nick Khan for getting him back there, along with, Triple H and stuff. Now, he does state that before he signed the contract, he did talk with Triple H, before the ball, quote-unquote, really began rolling. Triple H and Punk had a FaceTime talk where they started burying the hatch before, business. Things that Punk said seemed silly now. Because back when Punk was with them originally, he made his he made his feelings well known on air and off, about how things were going. He did, Punk did tell Ariel that the contract was done over the Thanksgiving period, and he also stated that his lawyer wasn't too happy of having to do OT during the holiday. Punk did state that he knew that when negotiations, or he does state, I should say, that when negotiations could have taken longer, he told Nick Khan the return had to be for Survivor Series. And that's how it came out. He's the one that told him. He's the one that told him, hey, I got to do this. If you're going to make me return, I got to be, at Survivor Series in my hometown. Now, he does talk about the Raw visit that he did in 2023 when he was still under AEW contract. And, he said it's just a set of coincidences. It's a lot of stuff that we heard. Basically, Punk had done some commentary for Cage Fury Fighting Championships, which he still does. That's one benefit, and that's good that they allow him to do that. That's one benefit that they allow him to continue. He said he had done commentary for Cage Fury Fighting, Cage Fury Fighting Championships, another MMA promotion in Florida. And he was heading home on a flight that coincidentally had, people from WWE on it, staff and superstars. And he mentions that when he sat next to Jason Jordan, and he knew about Jordan since, Jordan's days in FCW, now which became NXT. And he said, speaking to him, it was kind of like, it took him a bit to recognize each other. And they just started talking. And then he mentions a funny incident where Liv Morgan helped him find his lost set of earbuds, which is the wireless earphones that Apple has out. Liv Morgan basically got on her hands and knees and helped him try to find it and everything. And basically that led to a text conversation with Bayley. Bayley invited Punk backstage. He said that with no wife or dog at home, he went, stating he's an old timer and was not there attempting to get a job, maybe free catering. He does state that he was expected to be, asked to go home. He said he went to say hi to Bayley and a few people, yet the response people within AEW felt was they were betrayed, when he visited WWE. WWE Raw, that is. And he says the expression on Punk's face, and basically the notes that have been taken, states the expression on Punk's face suggested he could not understand the issues. Context later came up that Punk had no contract from AEW, or context later came up that Punk had no contact from AEW after Brawlout. Interestingly, Punk felt that this anger from AEW folks was the hypocrisy of him visiting people backstage to what talent could say things on the air. Basically stating how, certain talent could get away with saying things. I was like, wait a minute, well, you're getting mad at me for just visiting some, friends and, being via invitation, at WWE Raw. And yet you're allowing people to, say this stuff and shoot on me without any, consequences heading their way, it just didn't make sense to him, and I agree with that. It's like, there's a hypocrisy there. It's like, what the hell, you know? And I think it also stems from, them allowing their talents to appear in other promotions outside of AEW. He basically states that the only people that knew about him coming back were his wife, AJ Lee, Nick Khan, Triple H, and the lawyers knew. His family knew, but only when he told them via voice text on his way to the building. And he said he signed, he said basically him debuting was second. He basically said that the time frame between him signing the contract and the debut was seconds. He said he signed and walked into Gorilla, just like that. Now they did bring up that, now Ariel did bring up his interview with Becky Lynch, which he did days prior. And Becky told Ariel that her husband was angry that, he was not told of Punk's return. And Punk, reiterated that he was in the same boat as everyone else. He claims that all the teases leading to Survivor Series, Shinsuke mentioning best in the world, commentators dropping hints, GTS being used, was a surprise to him also. He was basically wondering, man, should I go and get myself tanned or something? What's going on here? He says the return was another high moment for him in his career because the crowd was loud. He said he couldn't hear his music. He described it as ethereal. And he said when he got backstage, there was pats on the back and hugs. He did say in it, this is a quote that's been taken. It says, 100% a moment you do not want to end. And that was from CM Punk on the interview. He does state that WWE is different and everything, compared to the last time he was there. It's friendlier compared to the Shark Tank and super competitive nature it had before when he was, there previously. He does say when he first came, basically says it was brutal. Okay, this is what he said. He said basically it's a friendlier atmosphere compared to the previous time he was in WWE, which was competitive, Shark Tank, super, judgmental attitude and all that. That he faced when he came in initially, which was brutal. Punk does describe how things are now relaxed and laid back. He said before this, Punk described his impact on the locker room. Punk describes how, as an inspirational figure, he's aware of how he has influenced this current generation of, talent of wrestlers. This is what Punk said to him. Punk basically mentioned something someone told to him. We don't know who this is, but they said that they're super glad he's back, so they can. Okay, this is a quote. This is something somebody told Punk. Once he came back, they said, "They're super glad you're back." Okay, this is what they said to Punk. They said, "I'm super glad you're back here." Oh, it's early. I do apologize. Like I said, I'm trying to do this before my mom gets up. But they state. This is something Punk. Somebody said to Punk. They said, "I'm super glad you're back here, so you can experience the culture you created. You were a catalyst for this, and then you left." Now we don't know who that could have been, but basically describing how different things are coming from him. That's a big deal. Now he does mention that he did interact with Vince McMahon. He talks about his SmackDown appearance was flying by the seat of his pants, being taken to NXT and then flown to get a tour of the new Titan Towers, and then that's where he met Vince and WWE's headquarters gyms. He said he was on the phone with the Carnival people when Vince's trainers came in and told Punk to get off the phone because Vince doesn't like phones in the gym. He states that Vince gave him a big hug and said, "Welcome home and let's connect after working out." However, it did not happen. He just, laughed and chuckled about it with Ariel, saying stuff came up when Ariel asked if, things happened. And he said stuff came up, and that's obviously referencing the Janelle Grant situation. And then, of course, when they talked about that, He said, there is no positivity there. I didn't read all the allegations, but I read text messages and I went, oh, F this, and this is indefensible. Now, he didn't avoid it. Punk basically gave his initial thoughts of how he felt Vince was very dumb and leaving a paper trail. Punk says his biggest concern going forward there must be reparations and amends that need to be made to the victims. He does agree with what Ariel says. If when Ariel asked him, because he did ask him this, he said, "Is the business better without Vince there and everything?" And Punk says, "Yeah." He said basically that if this is true, the behavior that Vince has demonstrated is evil. He said he had no idea. He said Punk basically said this. He said he had no idea about any real life abuse, and that this was, Emperor Caligula in Rome, where everything was out in the open. He does describe that, like his friendship with Chris Benoit, he described Benoit as pragmatic. It's hard to reconcile, but it's sad. And he mentions basically when he talks about Benoit and making that comparison, he said he was with Benoit basically like a week before the whole murder suicide occurred, and that he was in the gym with Benoit. Benoit introduced him to his son, who had, put the X's on, who had taped up his, hands. He had his hands taped up to work out with his dad, and I guess with Punk, and his son had X's on his hands, and Benoit's like, this is because of you. He wants to be like you. So, yeah, and then of course finding out what happened, that's just like you said with Vince, it's like, oh, F this is indefensible, and it is, and then he says this, and this is about Vince, he says, he ruined his life, ruining other people's lives. Part of me is like, good, we got him, now shuffle it into the basement. Basically, he says there has been no reconciling, between him and Colt right now. He says basically he talks about this year's WrestleMania. He talks about how he sees Rock's return as motivating and positive, and basically that Rock being on there gets more eyeballs on the product, and for the younger wrestlers, they have a chip on the shoulder, as he did, and should put, and that Rock being there should push them to maximize their minutes. And then Punk states that he had reparations at the same main event 2 years ago. Oh, let me reread that. Like I said, I'm doing this early. I do apologize. He says, although Punk states he hates the repetitions of the same main event 2 years in a row, he says the catch, and this is his catch on that, even though he doesn't like repetitive main events 2 years in a row, this is his catch on it. He says, if you can make this good, who am I to say it's bad? Now he does say that he does believe the original plans were for him to take on Seth Rollins as the world title. And he said he would have been content. He would have been content with that. And he suggested that it would have been because of how he approaches wrestling from a booker's mindset. And then here's the one that really got people talking. Here's where people really got talking and everything when it comes to this. This is what they were looking forward to. The all-in and the real glass situation. Basically, Punk talked about this. And, basically said, he talked about what led to his AEW exit. He basically says there was no one there to pick him up from the airport, so he went on an adventure on the London Underground. While he joked it was fun, in the same breath, Punk states it's irresponsible to leave someone stranded at the airport, which AEW did. Usually if you're a wrestling promotion, whether you're a small, medium, just starting out and everything, and you're booking certain talents from around the country, if not the world, then you have a responsibility to pick them up from their from where they're coming in from, and that didn't happen. He goes on to say they go on to talk about when Jack Perry in the pre-show match with Hook commented, "Real glass, cry me a river." He says Punk was watching. Punk states he was watching when Jack said that, directly to him. Because Ariel asked him, "Do you think that was directly at you?" And he said, "Oh yeah, it definitely was at me." But here's what's interesting. Preceding all this, Punk states that on the second Collision episode, Tony Schiavone came to him because Jack Perry was cussing out multiple staff, including the doctor. Punk said, "Look, I don't want to be involved. Dude isn't supposed to be here." And Punk's approach, and he said this, a couple times here, when it comes to AEW, he says, "If you don't handle it, I will. And you're not going to like how I handle it." That's basically what it was. Punk was asked to handle it. He states that Jack Perry wanted to smash the window of a rental car with a pipe for an angle. And Punk said that everyone who had told Jack no. Punk stated that everyone had told Jack no. Punk told Jack no. Punk also mentioned that he told Jack no as well, and explained the logic that if Jack Perry destroyed a rental car, then the rental company might decide not to rent again to pro wrestlers, which is true. It doesn't matter if you're a pro wrestler or an athlete, or just a normal person like me. If you rent a car and you decide, "I'm going to smash this because someone dared me to," they're not going to want to rent anything out to you again. He mentions that the safety aspect also comes. He also mentions the safety aspect that comes with wrestling with working with real grass. Let me repeat that. Punk also states talks about the safety aspects that comes with working with real glass. Punk stated that he spoke calmly, saying, "If you want to do this, do it on Wednesday." Punk did also acknowledge that Punk. Okay, let me rephrase. Let me reread this. Punk acknowledged as a younger kid he had taken this kind of stuff personally, and might have gotten fired up about someone telling him what to do. Now, basically stating that when he was younger, he could understand, that. I guess what he's trying to say there, or what he was trying to say there, was that as a younger kid himself, he would have taken it personally as he would have done what Jack did, basically. Maybe I think that's what he's alluding to. Maybe not. I'm not really sure, but it sounds like that's what he's saying. That that if he was in Jack's place as a younger guy again, he probably would, like he used to, he probably would have taken it personally as well. I don't know. Again, read into that if you will. Read into that as you will. But yeah, he says he acknowledges as a younger kid he had taken this kind of stuff personally, and might have gotten fired up about someone telling him what to do. Basically, again, it sounds like he kind of understands where Jack's coming from, but also knows being more wiser and mature. Yeah, this isn't a good idea. Now, as we get to All In, Punk tells Tony Khan to handle it. Punk claims Tony said to him, "What do you want me to do?" And nothing happened. That's what Punk said. Nothing happened. He basically said, if they didn't do something, he would. He would. Basically, that's what he stated. He stated about that to Schiavone. He stated that to Tony Khan. He said nothing happened, and Punk, in his own words, said, which he repeated several times in the interview, he was going to do something that AEW and Tony Khan would not like, and he did. And this is what he stated. He said, this is what Punk's side of things is. When Jack came back to the curtain, Punk basically asked Jack, "Why do you have to do this dumb internet, crap?" And Jack said to do something about it. Punk's response, "I thought I was doing the responsible thing. I just choked someone a little bit." Things were then broken up. Punk said he competed in the opening match of All In due to the respect for Samoa Joe, Jerry Lynn. Punk said he competed in the opening match of All In due to his respect for Samoa Joe, Jerry Lynn as the road agent, Paul Turner as the referee, and the fans. Afterwards, in his locker room, Punk said he asked if he could watch the rest of the card before security came to see him. Punk said he left without a fuss and got nandoos for the boys, which is, I guess, chicken, if you will, the fried chicken. He talks about Tony Khan and the business. Punk says he told Tony Khan after releasing Jack Perry from a bit of choking, "You're a clown, I quit." This was the last time he spoke to Tony Khan. Punk said he did not feel he did anything to make Tony fear for his life because, if you remember, Tony Khan came out days later in Chicago, of all places, not once but twice, on camera and in person, and stated that he fired CM Punk Phil Brooks with cause. And according to CM Punk here, Phil Brooks himself, that wasn't the case. Now, that was the last time he spoke with Tony Khan. Punk says he did not feel he did anything to make Tony feel a fear for his life. He believes that this is a concentrated. Punk believes that there was and is a concentrated enough. Let me read that. Punk says and believes that there is a concentrated enough to slander and ruin his character, or there was basically he believes there was evidence enough out there to to have his character slandered and ruined. He said at its core, this for Punk is where the issues came in. Punk said Punk said that he felt some were trying to dim the top star out of jealousy and only hurting the company in the process. When Ariel Hawaii asked about Tony Khan to Punk, Punk's truth was he's not a boss, he's a nice guy, and that is a detriment to the AEW business. And he's right. You can't be a nice guy and run a wrestling business or any kind of combat professional sports business. You gotta be serious. You gotta be mature about it. You gotta be like, yeah, I'm a fan, but I also gotta be a boss. So, that coming from Punk, who was the world champion not once but twice, and was one of two world champions. Yeah, that's not a good look for Tony Khan. Throughout the interview, while discussing Tony Khan, Punk does state after Brawl Out, which was the media scrum situation with the Bucks and everything, it would have been easier for Khan to release him instead. Instead, Punk states that Tony's idea was 2 separate shows. CM Punk said that's not going to work, partly due to business. But Tony Khan wouldn't listen. He said, "Don't worry, we're going to get this new show. You can be good, everything good." And Tony Khan, and here's the one thing that Punk stated in the interview. Tony Khan, no matter how many times CM Punk tried to tell him, "Look, it's not going to work. Just let me out. Let me go do my own thing. Be free of this place." Tony Khan would not let him go. And what that makes Tony Khan sound like is a very possessive individual. Basically, like, he's a kid. He's a kid that basically collects all these wrestling figures and plays with them in a toy wrestling ring, displays them, and then when someone says, "Well, you gotta get rid of this stuff or sell some of this stuff to help out around financially," he's the kind of guy that's like, no, I don't want to let these go. I can't do that. No, mine. And that's what it sounds like, honestly. Now, one of the talking points throughout the interview is Punk repeatedly mentioning and emphasizing wrestling is about making money. He says his mindset is always on wrestling as a business. He describes how he cannot turn off the wrestling booker in his head. For Punk, there was and is a clear conflict in his mind between what AEW wants to do and what WWE is doing. I'm just checking something right there. Punk does state he thought he was coming into AEW to help and hopefully teach. Punk said he felt he was brought in for other reasons. He states his views, that being CM Punk, his views of the business are a recurring theme throughout the interview, or throughout this interviews. Okay, let me reread that. Punk's views. This is what some of these articles I'm taking the notes from to give you, because I did see most of the interview, especially this part. He does, but basically they mention in some of these articles and notes that Punk's views of the business are a recurring theme throughout the interview, and they are. They are. He states that the business is about money. Punk even questions if AEW is about having good matches as their focus. Something indirectly connects to the indie mindset twice, or something that does indirectly connect to the indie mindset twice. Punk uses the mindset that they have as an anecdote of going to an indie show and a wrestler asking Punk what they could do better, and Punk stating that just saying to sell more and flip less is a preference a la flavor of ice cream. The fact that the house was sold out to Punk is what's more important. Now, Punk did question Schiavone on the quote-unquote loaded question of AEW being successful. Punk states that there are different metrics. He sensed that the mindset of AEW is caught in the indie mindset, which was his focus at the start of his career, rather than being on TV where things are different. While saying that there is nothing wrong with this, Punk does say that Punk does say that's a different business to what he wants to do. Now, he does say that if you're some goof, now this is what's really interesting, because this was directly aimed at Dave Meltzer and even Brian Alvarez to an extent. He says, and I quote, this is CM Punk on the interview. He says, if you're some goof saying you had a 5-star match and the building is quarter full, we're not in the same business. And he's right, because there's more to, there's more than just having 5-star, 10-star matches, if you will, in a wrestling ring, compared to doing it in front of half a crowd and a full-size crowd. Like, imagine, okay, the Ospreay Takeshita match at Revolution. That's a good example of having a 5-star, 10-star match in front of a sold-out crowd. You have a reason for that kind of match to take place, and to, as a competitor, to want to go out and really give your all, because you're doing it in front of a sold-out house. But it's different if you want to try to do it in front of a crowd that's less than what that building can hold. It doesn't make sense. It's not good for business. And a lot of people that have been talking about this interview have been stating basically the same thing, that AEW could put on great wrestling, but you need to have the right venues to do it in that make it feel more fuller and more ambiance and noise. And a good example of them not doing that, was when they were in Quebec. I think it was Quebec, and they only had like 3,000 people, seated in an 18,000 seat arena. That doesn't look good. But compared to having half of a 10,000 seat arena full, or almost full, that's different. So a lot of people have said that AEW may have to look into the smaller arenas, and hopefully that's one thing they're starting to do, because Dynasty is going to be in a smaller venue in St. Louis than normal. I mean, they could try to go to the St. Louis, to the venue where the Blues play. They could try to do the TWA Dome or Edward Jones Dome, but they're doing a small venue that I think is perfect. Now, CM Punk does state that AEW will exist as long as Tony Khan keeps putting money into it. He said it was not the alternative he believed wrestling needed as a last chance. Now, Punk does repeatedly give the impression that AEW caters to a niche market. He says when talking about the MJF feud, he said that MJF's biggest mistake was catering to the internet audience. And that he states WWE's audience is wider than the internet. Now, he does talk about the Hangman situation, Hangman Adam Page. Punk does state he was more offended by insider terms of wrestling being thrown around than swearing. So when Hangman Adam Page commented on protecting AEW from Punk, the issue came in that what Page said was not agreed with Punk and Vince. Punk stated that Hangman went off script. Punk did not say any of the things they discussed backstage. Oh, not Punk. Okay, let me reread that. Punk stated that Hangman went off script. Page did not say any of the things they discussed backstage. In the moment, Punk could hardly hear Page. In the moment, Punk could hardly hear Page. Punk's view is Hangman wasted TV time and money by slandering him. He also states he was asked professionally why this happened, and Punk claims Page said he believed Punk was the one. Punk had one of his friends fired, which was Colt Cabana, which was not true. Punk stated that he had a lawyer, went to Tony Khan, and felt this was a profession. Respect for Punk is in the default. Punk hinting at the elite suggests they based their opinion based on what one person said. And CM Punk's answer basically is a lot of these notes have been highlighting. Everything went off the rails from there. They do talk about the all-out media scrum, and Punk jokes and says one of his top three promos. Basically, they do state that it's interesting that now some of these articles that did transcripts and everything on this, notes on this, stated that it's interesting that Punk referred to the reporters at the AEW media scrum with air quotations, and commented that some of these reporters in his mind do not fact check and listen to what the wrestler friends say, listen to what the wrestler friends say. He described it as high school mean girls and cliquey. When Hawani asked him, brought up Tony Khan sitting uncomfortably, Punk said it was nothing Tony had not heard before. Punk again put responsibility for not being stopped on Tony. He basically saying he should have handled it. Now they do state this will prove a controversial aspect of this interview in the following days, where and who was responsible for which actions, who did and who did not do something. Because obviously there's going to be people close to those in AEW, close to Tony Khan, that are going to say differently. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now they do mention the NDAs and controversy. Now they do state Punk did not go into details about Brawl Out because he can, but his phasing of how he did not want to have to sign an NDA because he did nothing wrong will again be gunpowder. Yet Punk said he had nothing to hide, but then won't talk about it because there's an NDA in place. Now when Ariel asked him why there is an NDA, again Punk puts focus on Tony Khan. Punk said he felt uncomfortable talking about the topic, but while regretting the way that it was handled, particularly the scrum, which he felt was cringe. Punk acknowledged he did one when he returned to WWE because it was fitting. His issues is the merits of wrestling journalism. He does state that there's difference between what he says. Okay, they do state that there's a difference between what Punk says he can say and what you want to say. Punk, on the other hand, does not like how things have grown and how it presents it. Yet states from the controversy he has, and will make money from it, which is kind of what he's doing right now. A lot of people even point this out, that you're seeing what's going on, with him and Seth on screen, him and Drew. The Seth situation stems from what he said as advice to Seth when he was part of the Fox WWE backstage, and they're using that now to be like, hey, you guys might be getting along now, but let's make some money off that past, you know. He did. Now here's the other article. Here says, "Just let me go," in his return. During the he states that at this point during his AEW run, Punk said, "Yeah," when Ari asked if he would have been happy to be let go. It was not what AEW was sold to him, as. For 6 months, Punk said no one talked to him. Punk paid for his surgeries and only had contact with AEW's Dr. Sansom. He said, "Why return to AEW?" This was Ariel asked him. Punk said he had a lot of friends in the company and that Tony would not release him. Punk's mindset was to do some good, do some fun shows, and feature some wrestlers he supported. But ideally, he would have rather not returned at all. They do state that Collision was for Punk, because that's what Tony Khan originally meant it for. And that's what the article says here. It says Collision for Punk was the best of a bad situation. At this high level, but this is what Punk said. He said it was supposed to be fun. He said his contract had a year left. At no point did he feel like it would work. It's not the way you facultate things. That's what that's one of the things he said during the MMA. They're basically quoting a lot of the main talking points, main answers he would give during this interview. They do state that from the start, Punk said that he felt the Elite never wanted him in AEW due to interactions and the way things were handled. So, yeah. Basically, what it is that his mindset is totally different than AEW's mindset, than Tony Khan's mindset. Now, again, one of the things I'm noticing with these articles is they're highlighting certain sections of the interview. Money on the table. Here's another section. They state in the articles, one of these articles, that throughout, Punk's Booker mindset is revisited. While discussing throughout history previous backstage fights that then led to big feuds that made money, as well as in other sports like the NHL, he hinted that the end of Brawlout was not capitalized on. When talking about his counterfeit bucks line in his Collision return, Punk referenced calling out Paul Heyman in his pipe bomb promo as a parallel. In Punk's mindset, everything in his mind was related to television. Yet the magic of CM Punk blurring the lines. Now, earlier, Punk said he enjoyed making the fans think audibles had been called and making fans believe there was controversy. Elsewhere, during the interview, Punk acknowledges that guys like him and The Rock can break the rules. Is that fair? And Punk says, because that is questioned by Ariel Helwani, is that fair? And Punk says maybe, but Punk justifies it from the booker's mindset. If someone is going to do something, it needs to be as good as it can be rather than for no point. Highlights of AEW. He says, Punk basically states that the positives outweigh the negatives. He said he made a lot of friends. He got to do a lot of cool stuff, like work with Sting, which he never would consider would be a possibility in his career. He says, however, this was as much as, or however they've stated this is as much as it was explored. Punk does emphasize he's genuinely enjoyed his time, but has to be brutally honest from his perspective, which is basically, yeah, he enjoyed his time there, but it wasn't a good fit, and it wasn't what he was sold by, if you will. Punk described what he did with MJF as head and shoulders above the rest, which is true. Those guys made magic. He says the talent in AEW is unbelievable, but the controversial thoughts will be the focus. So, yeah. That's basically about it when it comes to the interview. And I do apologize if it wasn't the best recap or discussions here and everything. But I'm going to say this. And you can watch the interview yourself. I'll link it here at the end. He's not wrong when you look at stuff here. He's not wrong. It's like, if you're Tony Khan and you want to bring in a big name that you know is going to help your career. It's going to help your career. Just not your career, but your company. Excuse me there. Again, it's early. I do apologize. I'm trying to do this before my mom wakes up. But if you're Tony Khan and you want to bring in a big name that in the early stages of your company, is going to help elevate it, get eyeballs on it, and a name like, let's say, CM Punk is available, then what you need to do, if you're Tony Khan, what you need to do is do your research. You're a wrestling fan, right? You need to do your research and realize, oh, I'm bringing this guy in. Let me check and make sure with some of my talent if they're cool with this guy coming in. And if some of them are not, especially if some of them are EVPs, maybe it's not a good idea. Now, here's the thing. Nobody can deny, nobody can deny that AEW and Tony Khan need to be given credit for getting, Punk out of retirement and back into wrestling. Nobody can deny that, or else we wouldn't have CM Punk in WWE again, and basically on the verge of feuding with the likes of Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and maybe even The Rock. And even Cody. So, gotta give him credit there. It's just the way things were handled, mismanagement-wise. Because, again, if you're the owner of a company, and your talent, your talent that you brought in is telling you, hey, take care of the situation with this guy, or handle the situation with this guy, and you don't do anything, and they're telling you, okay, if you don't do it, I will, and you won't like it, then, that says a lot. That says a lot, because it's basically stating to the world that you're not really a boss. You're exactly what everyone has stated you are. And I've stated it before. I think I stated it way before some people like JD and Alex have, and even Solomonster. And that is, you are nothing more than a fan. That's all you are. I mean, what's going to happen when Bryan Danielson wants to hang it up after this year and maybe go back to WWE and work in a producer capacity, a trainer capacity? What's he going to do? Is he going to say, oh, no, Daniel, I can't let you go. Oh, I can't let you retire. It's like, but this is his plan. This is his goal. And yet you're not going to let him do that? Why? You know what that makes you look like? It makes you look like what I mentioned earlier. It makes you look very possessive. Very like, no, my toy, you don't play with. Or no, you're mine. I'm never letting you go. That's when it makes you look like. And that's not good. So, all I can say about this interview is I highly recommend go check it out. Because right now, we're either going to eventually get the other side of the story, in some capacity, or we're just going to have the CM Punk side of things, and everybody is going to lean more towards him because he's more willing to tell it like it is even if he has to, skirt around certain topics that he can't really talk about. More people are going to believe him than the other side if they don't hear anything. And sometimes there's an old saying of, when one side, doesn't hold anything back and skirts around certain things they can't say because of reasons, when that one side is willing to do that, and then the other doesn't say anything in response, then that silence is all you need to hear to know, or that silence is all you need to hear to acknowledge that the person that just opened up is the more truthful one. So yeah, I do recommend checking this out. I do recommend checking it out. I am going to say this. Tony Khan ended up releasing a dozen talents, or almost a dozen talents, yesterday that have not been utilized as much. And it's the first time we've ever seen like a mass release from them, if you will. Basically, they're doing what WWE used to do, or what WWE did last fall, if you will. And now they're doing it. And people are trying to think, is there a coincidence between this? Like, Punk says these things in the interview. Are we starting to see releases as a result of that? That's something. Hopefully, maybe dots will be connected, and we might, maybe we'll find out some truth. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe there's no connection. It's just coincidence, but we'll see. But a lot of people are finding that very suspicious. But yeah, if I'm Tony Khan, and I'm hearing this does not make me look good. It doesn't make me look good. It doesn't make my company look good. And at a time when I'm trying to get my company back on its feet, back to prominence, it does not make you look good. It does not make you look good. And if I'm Tony Khan, I'm worried. I'm sweating bullets knowing that, hey, I'm already going out there and telling people like Eric Bischoff, hey, I'm glad you're canceling and shutting down this one podcast of yours, right now, just in time for me to come out and announce a new media rights deal we're going to get. You're going out there and you're so assuring of you're going to get that, and yet this interview could get to the ears of the guy that could be responsible for that happening for you. And if it gets to his eyes, and he's the guy that want to punk around, and he hears this from him, and he compares what he's hearing from Punk, and then he compares it to what you said. Yeah, if I'm Tony Khan, if I'm AEW, I'm worried. I'm worried about not getting the media rights deal. I'm worried about, possibly being regulated to a more smaller WBD network. Because, there have been rumors of them going to True TV. So I'd be worried. But, yeah, I do recommend checking this out. And that's really all I can say on it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Comment if you like. What did you think of the interview? And until then, talk to y'all later.